Hello, and welcome back to Kim Reads as we continue with Wicked. For one short wet month, the Quadling glassblower. For one short wet month, early in the next year, the drought lifted. Spring tipped in like a green well water, frothing at the hedges, bubbling at the roadside, splashing from the cottage roof in garlands of ivy and string flower. Melena went about the yard in state of mild undress so that she could feel the sun on her pale skin and the deep warmth she had missed all winter. Strapped in her chair in the doorway, Elphaba, now a year and a half old, hit her breakfast minnow with the bowl of her spoon. "Oh, eat the thing, don't mash it," said Melena, but mildly. Since the child's chin sling had been removed, mother and daughter had begun to pay some attention to her. To her surprise, Melena sometimes found Elphaba endearing, the way a baby should be. The view was the only thing she had seen since leaving the elegant mansion of her family, the only thing she would gaze upon ever again, the windswept surface of Ilswater, the distant dark stone cottages and chimney of rush margins on the other side, the hills lying in a torpor beyond. She would go mad. The world was nothing but water and want. If a frolic of elves scampered through the yard, she would leap on them for company, for sex, for murder. "Your father is a fraud," she said to Elphaba, "off fighting himself all alone, all winter, leaving me with only you for company. Eat that breakfast, for you'll get no more if you throw it on the ground." Elphaba picked up the fish and threw it on the ground. "Your father is a charlatan," continued Melena. "He used to be very good in bed for a religious man, and that's how I know his secret. Holy men are supposed to be above earthly pleasures, but your father enjoyed his midnight wrestling. Once upon a time, we must never tell him we know he's a humbug. It would break his heart. We don't want to break his heart, do we?" And then Melena burst into a high peal of laughter. Elphaba's face was unsmiling, unchanging. She pointed to the fish. "Breakfast. Breakfast in the dirt. Breakfast for the buds," Melena said. She dropped the collar of her spring robe a little lower. The peaked yoke of her bare shoulders gyrated. Shall we go walk by the edge of the lake today, and maybe you'll drown?" But Elphaba would never drown. Never, because she would not go near the lake. "Maybe we go on a boat and tip over," Melena shrieked. Elphaba cocked her head to one side as if listening for some part of her mother not intoxicated with leaves and wine. The sun swept from behind a cloud. Elphaba scowled. Melena's robes dropped lower. Her breast worked their way out from between the dirty ruffles of the collar. "Look at me," thought Melena, "showing my breast to the child I couldn't give milk to for the fear of amputation. I, who was the roast of Nest Hardings. I, who was the beauty of my generation. And now I'm reduced to company I don't even want. My own screaming, thorny little girl." She was more grasshopper than girl. Those angular little thighs, those arching eyebrows, those poking fingers. She's about the business of learning like any child, but she takes no delight in the world. She pushes and breaks and nibbles on things without any pleasure, as if she was on a mission to taste and measure all the disappointments of life, in which rush margins is amply supplied. Mercy from the unnamed God. She's a creep. She is. She is. Or we might take a walk in the woods today and pick the last of the winter berries. Melena was full of guilt at her lack of motherly feeling. "We can put them in a pie. Can we put them in a pie? Shall we, honey?" Elphaba didn't speak yet, but she nodded and began to wiggle to get down. Melena started a clapping game Elphaba took notice of. The child grunted and pointed to the ground and arched her long, elegant legs to illustrate her desire. Then she gestured to the gate leading from the kitchen, garden, and hen yard. There was a man at the uprights of the gate, leaning shy and hungry-looking, with his skin the color of roses at twilight, a dusky, shadowy red. He had a couple of leathern satchels on his shoulder and his back, and a walking staff, and dangerously handsome, hollow-looking face. Melena screeched and caught herself, directed her voice to a lower register. It had been so long since she had spoken to anyone but a whining toddler. "Good glory, you startled us," she cried. "Are you searching for some breakfast?" She had lost the social touch, but for an instant her breast would not be staring at him, yet she did not clasp her gown. "Please to forgive a sudden appearance by a stranger at Lady's Gate," said the man. "Forgiven, of course," she said impatiently. "Come in where I can see you. Come in, come in." Elva had seen so few other people in her life that she hid one eye behind her spoon and peeked with the other eye. The man approached. His movement showed the clumsiness of exhaustion. He was of large ankle and thick of foot, slender at the waist and shoulders, and thick again at the neck, as he had been made to lathe, and worked too briefly at the extremities. His hands, letting down the satchel, seemed like beasts with minds of their own. They were outsized and splendid. "Traveler to not know where he is," said the man. "2 nights to cross the hills from downhill Cornings, to look for the inn at 3 dead trees, to rest." "You're lost, your beard," said Melena, trying not to perplexed at her scrambled words. "No matter, let me fix you a meal. You can tell me your story." Her hands were at her hair, which once used to be thought precious as spun brass. At least it was clean. The man was sleek and fit. When he removed his cap, his hair fell out in greasy hanks, sunset red. He washed out the pump, stripping off his shirt, and Melena noticed it was nice to see waist on a man again. Frex, bless him, had run to plumpness in the year, or in some since Elva's birth. Were all Quadlings this deliciously dusty rose color? The man's name, Melena learned, was Turtleheart, and he was a glassblower from Ovals, in a little-known Quadling country. She bundled her breast at last reluctantly. Elva squawked to be let loose, and without much as flinching the visitor unbuckled her and swept her in the air and caught her again. The child crowd with surprise, even delight, and Turtleheart repeated the trick. Melena took advantage of his concentration on the brat to scoop up the uneven minnow from the dirt and rinse it off. She plopped it among the eggs and smashed tar root, hoping that Elva would not suddenly learn to speak and embarrass her. It would be just like the child to do that. Elphaba was too charmed by this man to fuss or complain. She didn't even whine when Turtleheart finally came to the bench and sat to eat. She crawled between his sleek, hairless clasps, for he had shucked off all his leggings, and she moaned some private tune with a satisfied smirk on her face. Melena found herself jealous of a female not yet 2 years old. She wouldn't have minded sitting on the ground between Turtleheart's legs. "I've never met a Quadling before," she said, too loudly, too brightly. The months of solitude had made her forget her manners. "My family would never have Quadlings to dine, not that there were many, or even any, for all I know. In the far lands around my family's estate, the stories make out that Quadlings were sneaking and incapable of telling the truth. How can a Quadling to answer such a charge if a Quadling is given always to lie?" He smiled at her. She melted like butter on warm bread. "I'll believe anything you say." He told her of her life in the outreaches of Ovals, the houses rotting gently to the swamp, the harvest of snails and milkweed, the custom of communal living and ancestor worship. "So you believe your ancestors are with you?" she prodded. "I don't mean to sound nosy, but I've become interested in religion myself. Does Lady to believe ancestors are with her?" She could hardly focus on the question. So bright were his eyes, and so wonderful it was to be called Lady. Her shoulders strengthened. "My immediate ancestors couldn't be farther away," she admitted. "I mean, my parents, they're still interesting, but they're so uninteresting to me, they might as well be dead. When dead, they may to visit Lady often." "They are not welcome. Go away," she laughed, shooing. "You mean ghosts? They better not. That's what I call the worst of both worlds, if there is an other land." There is another world, he said with certainty. She felt chilled. She scooped Elphaba up and hugged her tightly. Elphaba sagged as if boneless in her arms, neither fussing nor returning the hug, just falling limp from novelty of being touched. "Are you a steer?" asked Melena. "Turtle heart to blow glass," he said. He seemed to mean as an answer. Melena was suddenly of dreams she used to have, of exotic places she knew she was too dull to invent. "Married to a minister, and I don't believe in another world," she admitted. She hadn't meant to say that she was married, although she supposed the child implicated her. But Turtle Heart had finished talking. He set down his plate. He had left the minnow, and he took from satchels in a small pot, a pipe, and some sacks of sand and soda ash and lime and other minerals. "Might Turtle Heart to thank Lady for her welcome?" he asked. She nodded. He built up the kitchen fire and sorted and mixed his ingredients and arranged utensils and cleaned the bowl of his pipe with a special rag folded in its own pouch. Elphaba sat clump-like, her green hands on her toes, curiosity on her sharp, pinched face. Melena had never seen glass blown, just she had never seen paper made, cloth woven, or logs hewn from tree trunks. It seemed as marvelous to her as the local stories of the traveling clock that had hexed her husband into the professional paralysis from which he had quite escaped, though he had tried. Turtle Heart hummed a note through his nose or the pipe as he blew an irregular ball of hot greenish ice. It seemed and hissed in the air. He knew what to do with it. He was a wizard of glass. Melena had to hold Elphaba back to keep her from burning her hands to reach it. But what seemed like no time at all, it felt like magic. The glass had gone from being semi-liquid and abstract to hardly cooling reality. It was a smooth, impure circle, like a slightly oblong plate. All while Turtle Heart worked on it, Melena thought of her own character, going from youthful ether to hardening shell, transparently empty, breakable too. But before she could lose herself in remorse, Turtle Heart took her hands and passed them near, but not touching, the flat surface of the glass. "Lady to talk with ancestors," he said, but she would not struggle to connect with boring old dead people in the other land, not when his huge hands covered hers. She breathed through her nose to suppress the smell of breakfast in an unwashed mouth. Fruit and one glass of wine, or was it two? She thought she might as well faint. "Look in glass," he urged her. She could only look at his neck, his raspberry honey-colored chin. He looked at her. Elphaba came and steadied herself with a small hand on his knee and peered into. "Husband is near," said Turtle Heart. Was this prophecy through a glass dish, or was he asking her a question? But he went on. "Husband is traveling on donkey, and to bring elderly woman to visit you." "Is ancestor to visit?" Is old nursemaid, probably," Melena said. She was sloping down in his crippled syntax and unpatched sympathy. "Can you really see that down there?" He nodded. Elphaba nodded too, but what? "How much time do we have before she gets here?" she asked. "Till this evening?" They did not speak another word until sunset. They banked the fire and hooked Elphaba to a harness and sat her down in front of the cooling glass, which they hung on a string like lens in a mirror. It seemed to memorize and calm her. She did not even gnaw absent-mindedly at her wrists or toes. They left the door to the cottage open so that from time to time they could peer out from the bed to check on the child, who in the glare of a sunny day would not be able to focus her eyes to see the house shadows. And anyway, who never returned to look. Turtle Heart was unbearably beautiful. Melena dragon-snaked him, covered him with her mouth, poured him in her hands, heated and cooled and shaped his luminosity. He felt her emptiness. They were washed and dressed the supper mostly made, with the donkey brayed a half-mile down the lake. Melena blushed. Turtle Heart was back at a pipe, blowing again. Melena turned and looked in the direction of the donkey's serrated statement. Her lips, which always looked almost black against the new apple color of her skin, twisted in delight, chewed against each other. She bit her lower lip as if thinking, but she did not bleed. She had learned to manage the teeth somewhat, though trial and error. She put her hand on the shining disc. The glass circlet crossed the last blue of the sky until it looked like a magic mirror showing nothing but silver cold water within. Okay, that's the end of that chapter. See you later.